Okay, this is just going to be a quick video on contingency tables. Hopefully it'll help you understand and visually see what's going on when you have to calculate different distributions for them. So why use a contingency table? Contingency tables are helpful when we want to look at more than one variable in category. When we had our frequency table was just for one category. So when we want to be able to look at multiple things, this is helpful. Here's an example of the intro survey that we took, and it's broken down to compare the gender of a student and their political affiliations or feelings. If you notice, I could see that the total female students is 24, 7 liberal, 13 moderate, and 4 conservative. And I can see that the moderates total 19. So what percent of the class is male? So right now you have to figure out which of these numbers you're going to look at to find this percent. Well, it's helpful to think about the fraction, and remember the fraction is what you're looking at over the total. And so we're looking for male over total. And so there's 16 males in the class and 40 total students took the survey. So 0.40, which is 40%. You're allowed to leave your answer as a decimal or as a percentage. They are both the same and I will accept either one. Now let's try the percent of class that is moderate. This time our focus is to look on moderate students. And our total moderate students is 19 out of the total 40. So that gives us 0.475 or 47.5%. The next question is asking what percentage of the class are conservative females. So if you notice, these two are together. So that's very specific. It's asking for females that were conservative over the total. And so the conservative females you can find right here in this box, and there was only 4 of them. So 4 out of 40 is 0.10, which is 10%. Another thing that we could do with contingency tables is we can figure out marginal distribution. The marginal distribution is the distribution of one variable alone. And when we say distribution, it's going to say what each category is based on a gender or based on an age. One thing that's going to be helpful is if you think of marginal distribution, kind of like the margins of your paper, where they're vertical and horizontal. And that might help you remember that you're only going to look at one column or one row. You're not going to look at the entire thing. It might be helpful to actually circle the column or circle the row so that you have a visual of what's going on. So determine the marginal distribution for females. So I am only going to be interested in females, so I'm going to cross off everything else or circle females. And so now I need to figure out what the distribution for that row is. So there's 7 out of 24 liberals, 13 out of 24 moderates, and 4 out of 24 conservatives. That gives me the percents that is my marginal distribution. When you make your marginal distribution table as an answer, it needs to be the complete answer with the percents, or you could have written them as the decimal. But you have to write the complete table, and it needs to be the same format. So if you notice, this table was females on the left, and then the columns were the different political parties. This table needs to hold the same shape. All right, let's do the same thing for moderates. This time I'm really only looking at moderates, so I'm going to cross off everything else. And now I'm going to find the distribution of moderates that are females, which is 13 out of 19, and then the distribution of moderates that are males, which is 6 out of 19. We find these percents, and there's your marginal distribution. Conditional distribution is going to allow us to determine the distribution of a smaller group. So it's similar to the margin, but it's not the whole column or row. It's going to give us one answer. So conditional is going to give us one answer. So you're going to focus on a smaller group first and just look at that column or row. But again, it's not the whole column or row that's an answer. It's just one particular cell. So what is the conditional contribution of females for liberals? The second part right here where it says for liberals, that tells you what to look at. So I'm only going to look at my liberals column. And so now I want to find the females that were liberals. So those are female liberals, but I'm only looking at that column, so it's out of total liberals, which is 7 out of 13, which is 53.8%. So trying this again, this time we're doing the distribution of moderates for male students. And again, when it says for male students, that's your focus. You're only supposed to look at the male students, so I'm going to cross everything off. Now it's saying out of those male students, how many were moderates? So it's the moderate males over total males, which is 6 out of 16, which is 37.5%. The last thing we're going to look at is independence, and independence can be tricky, and we're not going to spend a ton of time on it in this chapter. Later in the book, we're going to learn a more formal way to solve it, but for now, to determine if something is independent is the conditional distribution of one variable is the same for each category. So regardless of what category it is, you're going to get the same percentage each time. The of tells you which marginal distribution to calculate, and you'll see that in the next problem. And again, there's going to be a more formal method that we'll use later in the year, but this is just going to give us a rough idea of how to calculate independence given contingency tables. So is political preference independent of gender? So of gender is telling me to look at the gender. So I'm going to start off by looking at females. And when I look at just females, I get these percents. So right now, I could stop and say, no, it's not independent because those percents are different. But it is helpful also to look at the males. So I'll look at the males. And the males, 2 of them are the same, but the third is not. So for them to be independent, it would need to be the same all the way across. Now, you're also going to have problems that are going to ask you to explain an association that you see. And when you do that, you'll look at both of these. And if you notice, it looks like for the females, most of the females tended to be moderate than the males, but then lower in the other 2 categories. So that's one association you could see. So things to remember. The first one, when you're dealing with marginal distribution, think of the margin and use that entire column or row. Cover up everything else or circle it so you know to focus on that. When you think of conditional distribution, remember to determine the smaller group first and only look at that column. You also need to remember that for conditional, you're only going to have one answer. So hopefully these things will help you understand the difference between conditional and marginal distribution and how to use contingency tables to find those.